Tashdile, this is Sakina Bhatt and welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines. China arrests 2 Tibetan students for designing football team flag and logo. Torture, death cases and human rights in Tibet raised at United Nations Human Rights Council. Swiss Parliament calls on government to implement human rights dialogue with China. 10th session of the 16th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile begins. Environment experts discuss environmental crisis in Tibet. World shows solidarity with Tibet on 62nd Tibetan National Uprising Day. Tibetan organizations in Switzerland submit petition for humanitarian solution to Tibetan asylum seekers. Chinese authorities have charged 2 Tibetan students for inciting separatism, for displaying a self-made flag and logo during a football match and sharing pictures on social media in Tholo, traditional Amdo province of Tibet. According to sources, the Henan Prefecture Intermediate Court sentenced Champa Tsering to 1 year and 6 months in prison, suspended for 2 years under probation and 1 year deprivation of political rights, while Dhukar Tsering has reportedly been exempted from criminal punishment as it was his first offense. The recent death cases of 19-year-old Tibetan monk Tenzing Nyima and 51-year-old Tibetan tour guide Kunchok Jinpa due to torture by the Chinese authorities were raised at the ongoing 46th session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on Thursday last week. Tinechuki called upon the Special Rapporteur and the UN Human Rights Council to press China to stop the practice of torture and conduct thorough investigation to hold accountable the Chinese authorities responsible for these deaths, as well as to ensure adequate and effective reparation to the victims and their families.
The list of violations faced by Tibetans is long, but the high-tech surveillance and the firewalls have made it difficult to get the whole picture of the situation in Tibet.
Tinechuki also urged the Council to establish an independent mechanism to monitor, analyze and report on the human rights situations in China, particularly in view of the urgent situations in Tibet, Xinjiang and Hong Kong. Speaking on behalf of the Society for Threatened Peoples, Kalden Somo, UN Advocacy Officer at the Tibet Bureau Geneva, expressed concerns over deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet, in particular, a double lockdown repressive situation since the outbreak of Wuhan-originated COVID-19. She called upon the UN Human Rights Council to urge China to cease all its repressive policies against the Tibetan people. The National Council of Switzerland called on the Swiss government to submit a detailed report on the situations of Tibetans in Switzerland, especially focusing on restrictions on freedom of expression and surveillance by the Chinese government. The postulate was passed with a majority of 134 in favor, 48 against, and 5 abstentions on Monday this week during the ongoing spring session of the Parliament. Similarly, on 9 March 2021, the National Council passed the postulate calling on the Federal Council to report on the bilateral human rights dialogue with China, including status implementation and future plans of the Federal Council on the dialogue process. Honorable Karen Keller-Sutter, head of the Federal Department of Justice and Police, speaking on behalf of the Federal Council, endorsed the postulate and noted that the Federal Council additionally would submit a detailed report on issues related to Tibetan asylum seekers, including their travel documents and hardship applications. The 10th session of the 16th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile began on Monday this week following COVID safety measures. The session's agenda include resolutions of official mourning, discussion and approval of the budget followed by Kasha's clarification and discussion, reviewing of the annual audit report, discussions on legislations followed by a question and answer session. The session is scheduled to conclude on 31st March. An online discussion on Tibet's environment was held on Tuesday this week. The discussion, entitled Tibet, an Environmental Crisis in Waiting, was chaired by Humphrey Horsley, author and former BBC Asia correspondent, and joined by environmental researchers. Sunam Singh Frasi, Office of Tibet, London, gave the opening remark. Along with the Tibetans, Tibet supporters and friends of Tibet around the world commemorated the 62nd Tibetan National Uprising Day by issuing message of support, raising Tibetan national flag in and in front of town halls and office buildings, and by taking to the streets in support of Tibet. U.S. Congressman and Chairman of Congressional Executive Commission on China, Jim McGovern, issued a statement in observance of the 62nd anniversary of Tibetan Uprising Day, where he expressed his expectation of a high-level State Department Special Coordinator for Tibetan issues to be named soon.
Now that Congress has passed both the Tibetan Policy Support Act and the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, it is our responsibility to ensure that the Biden administration effectively implements these bills. We expect that a high-level State Department Special Coordinator for Tibetan issues will soon be named. The Tibetan Policy and Support Act strengthens that position in many ways, including a mandate to work multilaterally and on protection of the environment and water resources of the Tibetan Plateau.
Canadian leader of the opposition, Honorable Erin O'Toole, issued a statement in honor of the Tibetan Uprising Day. The Conservative Party leader paid tribute to the brave women and men who sacrificed their lives for the just cause of Tibet, while noting his support for the non-violent struggle of the Tibetan people for genuine autonomy, human rights and justice for the past 62 years without either malice or compromise. The Tibetans in Belgium observed the day in Brussels at Schuman in front of the European Commission. Mr. Mikuláš Peksa, Czech member of the European Parliament from Pirate Party and President of Tibet Interest Group in the European Parliament, and Mr. Samuel Kogolati, Parliament member, Belgian Federal Parliament from Green Party, and Representative Tashi Finsok were the key speakers who reiterated his commitment to the Tibetan cause. More than 1,500 people in Paris commemorated the Tibetan Uprising Day. Representative Ngodub Tsering addressed Tibetan Uprising Day in New York, held in front of the United Nations. 16 cities of 8 countries across Central and Eastern Europe observed Tibetan National Uprising Day, and Tibetan national flags were hoisted by over 1,434 institutions. The countries include Switzerland, Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, Italy, Slovakia, and Hungary. Mayors of the city of St. Paul, Columbia Heights, city of Northampton, Minneapolis, and St. Louis Park issued proclamations declaring March 10 as Tibet Day. The Tibetan community in Japan, in collaboration with the Students for a Free Tibet Japan, organized the Peace March to commemorate the day. A joint petition with over 3,000 signatures was submitted to the Swiss government calling for a humanitarian solution to around 300 rejected Tibetan asylum seekers in Switzerland on Tibetan Uprising Day. The mass signature campaign was jointly organized by the Swiss Tibetan Friendship Association, the Tibetan Community of Switzerland and Liechtenstein, the Tibetan Women's Association of Switzerland, and the Tibetan Youth Association in Europe. The petition was submitted to the Swiss Federal Chancellery in the presence of Honorable Fabien Molina, member of the National Council, the upper chamber of the Swiss Parliament, who is also the president of the Swiss Parliamentary Group for Tibet. Honorable Fabien Molina assured his continued support for Tibet and Tibetans. So much for this week. See you next time and have a good weekend.